And we spoke about the history of the Altona Shul, and of course, like America runs on Dunkin', Prague runs on the Golem. Everything is the Golem. Wherever you go, they're selling these little menchies, that look like the Golem, and there's Golem restaurant and Golem this and Golem that, and there's a big Avodah Zarah somewhere of the Golem, and literally it's like the most exciting thing going in Prague, especially when hockey season is not is inactive. But so we had a chance to speak about the Golem, and of course, lots of people asking, is it true? Is it not true? And someone said, there's no way you could prove that someone didn't have a Golem, right? You can only prove that someone had a Golem. But I think that we're able to go through this story, and the way when we look at all of the details, and we dig deep, we can see that it's pretty hard to fathom that the Maharal had a Golem. And I think that we did actually write a For the Record column with an article that we found going back to 1861. I'll read it quickly. It says, Prague. Some young men again had the courage to break into the garret of that remarkable old synagogue called the Altona Shul. The first time we were among them, and found many things remarkable to the antiquarian, such as a bill of divorce dated in the year 1407, a scroll containing the sections of the prophets as read in the synagogues, supposedly hailing from the 13th century, and which is the most remarkable among the fragments, a musical percussion instrument. There was also found a collection of psalms with peculiar signs over the words, supposed to have served as musical characters. The Golem was not found again. I'm not sure how much of this is satire at the end, but it seems like this was a regular occurrence where you already get to the late 1800s, the rumors of the Maharal's Golem, based on probably the first book that appears, and these are really the first we hear of the Golem, right? Is around then, and if you go back to the time of the Maharal, and you're not talking about, what year did the Maharal die?
1609.
1609, right? So we're talking about a time we have recorded a Spadim from, say, Rav David Gans, right? Who was a historian.
And a close Talmud of the Maharal.
Close Talmud of the Maharal, who would have enjoyed nothing more than to write about this incredible phenomenon that was the Golem, right? And there's nothing, right? There's other Spadim of Talmidim. Nobody writes about it. You have the Chida, Shem Agdalim, right, who talks about everything that he saw in Europe and the people he met, and definitely talks about things that he heard about. And the Chida would have been fascinated, right, by the story of Golem. And the Chida probably of people in that era was somebody that would have known how to create a Golem, right? And he also writes about all the quote-unquote Golem type people that he meets. But that's part of what makes his memoirs, his travel diaries, so interesting. By the way, Nachi seems to every week tell me about a new version, right?
3 new ones.
3 new ones that come out. So I think maybe there's like a competition who could put out the best version. But absolutely, definitely one of the most fascinating memoirs.
You also mentioned in the Altona Shul that the general source, the Christian sources, don't bring any either. You mentioned.
No, yeah, until much later on, children's books. But what's really interesting, obviously, is the research that Professor Schneur Lyman has done, and recently Ira Robinson's book on Rabbi Yul Rosenberg of Montreal, and his whole story of the Sefer that he discovered or supposedly discovered in the Royal Library of Metz, right, which had all kinds of stories, fascinating stories about the Golem. But we later find out there's a small problem, is that, first of all, there was no Royal Library in Metz. It's probably a library in Metz. But he claims that he found a manuscript written by the Maharal's son-in-law, which had all these incredible stories. But when examined closely, you see that there's some problems in that. Number one, the moral's son-in-law refers to himself as Zatzal, right? Usually authors don't write articles or write books when they're Zatzal, and he also makes mistakes with regards to the moral's family. So it's clear that the person who wrote this was not the moral's son-in-law. And later on, which is interesting, is what Schneur Lyman uncovered, is that when Yudel Rosenberg classifies I think he wrote one of the first translations of the Zohar. Yudel Rosenberg put out many, many different Sfarim, and he classifies them in different categories, and one of them is folklore, and he puts the moral. He puts the moral in that category. So probably either he realizes that he made a mistake and he shouldn't have put this out, and now he's admitting it, right? Or he always knew and he needed to make a parnasa, so he put that out. But the rayas, the proofs, you like that, Achi? You were there, right? The proofs that the Golem ever existed, they're not really there. There are a couple of other interesting anecdotes to mention. The Stipler does mention, like I think he says the Bavos to Golem, or I don't remember the exact terms, but it seems to be that it was that when asked about it, he's saying the Golem like that people talk about, not like he's not saying that there was a Golem. He's saying that people talk about the Maharal having a Golem. I don't believe that the Stipler ever said that he believes that the Maharal created a Golem, right? But
quite frankly, I don't think the Stipler researched it either. He had better things to do.
Right, that's true. But we do, right? We have the Rav Eliyahu of Chelm.
Yes, I was going to add the Chacham Tzvi in Chuvans in Siman Tzadi Gimel has a shaila if a Golem could be mitzaref to a minion, can account for one of the 10 of a minion. And he says, like the Golem that his grandfather, Eliyahu Baal Shem, who was the Eliyahu of Chelm, made a Golem. So first of all, that's a mention of a Golem. And he says, in Rabbi Yaakov Emden talks about Megillah Sefer, but the Chacham Tzvi and not make no mention of the Maral's Golem. That's the one they're mentioning, not a Maral's Golem. Maybe it got conflated, confused, I don't know.
I remember hearing of Aaron Lapiansky Shlita talk about that, tshuva. And he says that somebody once asked a rabbi about that, right? About whether a golem can be sorry for a minion. And the rabbi said, I have an entire shul of golems. He says, so it was a pashtus, right? They can be. But and then lastly, there's the story of the Rayats, the Rebbe Rayats, of Chabad, who Friedrich Rebbe, who as a child goes with his father, the Rebbe Rashab, and they go visit Prague, and I guess because of who he was, they're willing to bring him up to the attic. By the way, we were able to get the Alton show for 2 hours, but we were not able to get into the attic. I don't think anyone's able to get into the attic anymore, and that's the first question everyone asks about that attic. But he describes there the Rayatz's daughter, Rabbi Simchana, said as follows: I then asked my father to tell me what he'd seen there. My father paused for a moment and said, when I came up there, the room was filled with dust and shemus. In the center of the room, I could see the form of a man wrapped up and covered. The body was lying on its side. I was very frightened by the sight. I looked around at some of the shemus that were there and left frightened by what I'd seen. So what did the Friedrich Rebbe see? Who are we to say what is like that, what he saw, right? But he was a child, and I don't know what they told him. I don't know what he saw, but probably that's the closest we have to anyone saying. There was Rabbi Marcus Hirsch, who like early in the 20th century says he heard from a former shamus, who heard from his predecessor that they were the ones that buried the remains of what was left of the Golem together with the Geniza that was in the attic, right, in the cemetery in Prague. But there really isn't much else in terms of proof. But that hasn't stopped the city of Prague from capitalizing big time on this myth and making a lot of money. So listen, can we say whether the Maharal had a Golem or not definitively? No. We're going to leave it up to you to make that decision, you the listener. But to me, it's pretty hard to imagine, and to almost all the major scholars out there, as many, Gedolei Yisrael, they don't seem to take the whole story too seriously.
I would add two more things to wrap it up. Number one, in history research, we learn a basic idea that if something should have left a trail of sources and doesn't, then that's the greatest source imaginable that occurrence didn't take place. Not everything should have left a source behind. Some things are insignificant. If someone in some random little shtetl threw an apple across the road, then I wouldn't expect that to be recorded anywhere. But Prague was the capital of the empire at the time. The Maharal was the most famous rabbi in the world at the time. He had hundreds of Talmidim. There would be church records, political records, rabbinical records, Sfarim. Something should have been left in the record.
By the way, he was close with the royalty, right?
He had an audience with Emperor Rudolph.
And there would have, there's no doubt that when there were reports of that, right, there would have been said that this is the guy who created the Golem. Right? And they probably would have locked him up for that too. Or they would have asked him to create a whole Golems for their army, and we could stop with the Golem jokes, but, let's be honest, they may have had an army of Golems, but it's just really hard to imagine. So there are those who do say that part of the whole deal with Talmidim who saw the Golem was that they were sworn to secrecy for life. It's
speculative. The last thing I want to say is that I know we have a lot of Chabad listeners out there, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, because I've had some disputes and some hate mail as well in the past. This is in no way means to disrespect anyone who claims that there was a Golem. And it's a legitimate opinion, and if the Frierdiker Rebbe says he saw it, then I believe him that he saw it. I'm not sure what exactly he saw, and I don't know what details that tells us about what the Maharal used with this Golem, but, that's fine, and that's a very legitimate source, and that's great to believe it. And if your Rebbe said it and you believe in the Rebbe, go for it. And no one's telling you not to, and we're presenting all the different versions here and all the different sources here, and along with our own skepticism, which I think we're allowed to have as well.
And what I would add to this is what Yehuda said in the beginning of this conversation of the Golem, which is what I heard in Yeshiva, kind of what you said, Yehuda, which is it's irrelevant, really, if the Maharal made a Golem. What is important is that the Maharal wrote Gur Aryeh, and the Maharal wrote his other Sfarim. And the Maharal was the Maharal. The Golem part is irrelevant. It's relevant for the city of Prague and their tourism industry, but it's not really relevant for us. And I'll add also something about Rav Yudel Rosenberg that I actually have somewhat a cousin who's a descendant. But about him, that he was a Talmid Chacham. He actually wrote Sefer Yadis Nadarim on a Darim that's used in other.
Was he Einikul of the Baal Shem by then?
I don't know. But no? I will say, we know he forged. Definitely the Maharal's Haggadah that he found in this royal library, that is not true. The Maharal wrote Gvuras Hashem that has parts of Haggadah Shel Pesach, and it's been now created into a Haggadah. But what he did, there was no Haggadah either. So we know there's definitely a lot of questionable stuff. When I had Rabbi Shua Hartman, the foremost expert on Maharal, you can listen to that podcast episode from a while back on Sfarim Chatter. He didn't want to give an answer. He didn't want to say, again, same thing. I don't want to say for sure not, but, whatever. That's the same kind of thing. I want to say, so going back to something else about Prague, in Prague today, I think this is the Golem, there's a number of other things that stood out to me, being in that old cemetery. I said that was really awe-inspiring, is, first of all, so the kever of David Oppenheim, who I've done a podcast episode in the past. I don't know if you have, Yehuda, if you have not. He's the major bibliophile chief rabbi of Nikolsburg before he came to Prague. In the early 18th
By the
century.
way, underrated rabbinate, Nikolsburg, right?
Yes.
I don't think most people realize, right? You go through who were a bottom in
Maharal was also a rabbi there.
Who else?
Shamshon Fall
Hirsch, was it, right? Isn't that, was he in Frankfurt already when he applied for the job as chief rabbi of Of England? Is it Frankfurt?
Oh, no,
or was
I don't
it was
remember.
in Nicholsburg then? I don't even remember. Another thing we wrote about a long time ago. We could probably go back and look. I don't remember. But it's fascinating because you think of Nicholsburg as some backwater, but it really is not.
Right. Rav David Oppenheim was there. Rav David Oppenheim was we walked into the shul today. What was that? The in the Klois, in the Klaus shuls they call it now. And the Aron Kodesh says, Katzin, whenever Shmuel Oppenheim in Tafnun